Hello everyone and welcome to Uncut Voices. If you like the content in this video, make sure to subscribe. Certainly the recent case regarding Dr. Jumana Nagarwala versus the United States government has gained a whole lot of attention in headlines. It's especially popular in our little sub-community of circumcision scholars, activists, fanatics on Twitter and across many other social media platforms. But with all the information floating around, things can get quite incomprehensible, to say the least. So hopefully this video provides a clearer understanding of the case. So within this case of Dr. Jumana Nagarwala versus the United States government, Dr. Nagarwala and Dr. Frank Attar were 2 of 8 defendants that the U.S. government brought up charges against. Dr. Nagarwala was accused of performing female circumcision procedures on 9 girls, to be exact. And Frank Attar was the owner of the clinic that Dr. Nagarwala performed the procedures at. Other defendants were Frank Attar's wife, Farida Attar, accused of assisting Dr. Nagarwala in the circumcision procedures, as well as another woman. And then there were 4 mothers accused of bringing their daughters to Attar's clinic to have those procedures performed on them. And so that makes 8 defendants that the U.S. government brought up charges against on 8 counts. Within the first count, all 8 defendants were charged by the U.S. government for conspiracy to commit FGM. Within counts 2 through 6, all 8 defendants were charged with committing FGM and with aiding and abetting each other within the act. Within count 7, Dr. Jumana Nagarwala was charged with conspiracy to travel and to engage in illicit sexual conduct. Within count 8, 4 of the 8 defendants were charged with conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. Okay. The Female Genital Mutilation Law, or FGM Law, which criminalizes all circumcision procedures performed on female children below the age of 18, was passed by U.S. Congress in 1996. Basically, all defendants within this case were seeking to have all charges against them dismissed on the grounds that even though the U.S. Constitution allows Congress the legislative authority to create or enact laws through the Necessary and Proper Clause and the Commerce Clause, that these clauses still didn't grant Congress the authority to create an FGM law. And of course, in response to this, the government argued that based on these 2 clauses, the Congress definitely had the authority to create an FGM law. So let's take a look at these clauses. The Necessary and Proper Clause. Congress is given the power to make all laws considered necessary and proper. So even though the U.S. Constitution gives Congress power to create laws, that includes treaties, even legislation that can effectuate those treaties, the legislation and the treaties have to have some sort of logical, rational correlation. So the treaty that the U.S. government relied on in this case was the ICCPR Treaty, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights Treaty, ratified by Congress in 1992, before the FGM law. As mentioned before, even though the U.S. Constitution allows Congress to create treaties and legislation that can eventually effectuate those treaties, Congress must show that there is a rational relationship between legislation created and treaties created. So what the U.S. government did in this case was to try to justify the charges brought up against the defendants by trying to prove that there is a rational relationship between the FGM law and the ICCPR treaty. And they tried to do so by pointing to 2 articles within the ICCPR that could correlate with the FGM law. And those articles are Articles 3 and 24. Article 3 of the ICCPR Treaty ensures that men and women are treated equally under the law and that they both enjoy civil and political rights. Article 24 of the ICCPR Treaty protects all children under the law, regardless of race, gender, class, and other characteristics like religion and culture. So what the government did is it used those 2 articles to justify the creation of the FGM law and argued that the FGM law helped to fulfill the obligations of Articles 3 and 24, protecting women and children under the law. Makes sense, right? Well, not quite, because the court still couldn't see where there was a rational relationship between the articles the government pointed to as justification for the FGM law and the actual FGM law. Article 3 that the government used is used to ensure that men and women are treated equally. That includes equal opportunities to participate in elections, equal freedom of speech, has nothing to do with an FGM law created to protect children under the age of 18 from what is considered a physical abuse. Article 24 comes closer to the FGM law, but is still a little bit off because Article 24 protects all children regardless of their background, so on a non-discriminatory basis. However, the FGM law seems to take into account the religion and the culture of the children in question. So really, the necessary and proper clause couldn't be used here to support this idea that Congress has the authority to enact an FGM law because the government failed to show a rational relationship between the FGM law and the ICCPR treaty, which is a requirement of the necessary and proper clause, which calls into question the constitutionality of the FGM law itself. Another reason the necessary and proper clause couldn't be used to sustain the FGM law is because FGM is considered a local criminal activity, which means that criminal activity should be left to the states to regulate and to punish. With Congress creating this law, what it does is it exceeds the limits that Congress does have according to the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution grants Congress the power to regulate commerce between foreign nations, several states, and with the Indian tribes. The problem with trying to use the Commerce Clause to sustain the FGM law, which is what the government tried to do, is that the government failed to show how female circumcision is commercial activity or has a market which needs to be regulated by the FGM law. In fact, the only claim that the government put forward was that FGM was similar to child pornography and the selling of illegal drugs. The problem with that comparison is that child pornography and the selling of illegal drugs are multi-billion-dollar industries that are able to bring forth cases on a more consistent basis. With this female circumcision case, however, this is the first time the government has ever been able to bring up charges against offenders of the FGM law since it was passed in 1996. So how can there be a commercial activity for female circumcision if this is the first case of its kind? So in conclusion, neither the necessary and proper clause nor the Commerce Clause could sustain the FGM law, resulting in Bernard Friedman, who is the judge, resulting in his ruling of the FGM law as unconstitutional. And of course, after news outlets picked up on information regarding the ruling and ran with it, lots of anti-FGM activists went into panic mode. They assumed because of the ruling that lots of girls were not going to be protected, and actually it prompted many of them to pressure the states into implementing more strict laws against the female circumcision procedures performed on minors. Other anti-FGM activists even went as far as trying to prove that there is a market for female circumcision and that parents often take their children overseas to have these procedures performed on them, and that the argument regarding the Commerce Clause needs to be revisited. Other anti-FGM activists on social media, like Nimco Ali, felt the need to mention the gender of the judge, Bernard Friedman, pretty much creating this false impression that the only reason he made this ruling is because he's a man and this is a conversation involving the protection of young girls. Other anti-FGM activists on social media also compared this ruling to misogyny, sexism, and all these other things. You know, I just find it interesting that within an entire case regarding the U.S. Constitution, the FGM law, of course, congressional powers, which led to the ruling that the judge made, anti-FGM activists like Nimco Ali can dumb down that conversation, oversimplify it to just a conversation about the gender of the judge. And this is part of the problem with the anti-FGM rhetoric. I mean, facts and important details which are useful to anyone interested in protecting the rights of children are being replaced by sensationalized rhetoric and information only backed by emotions. This just limits the scope of people's understanding. This discourse on female circumcision is not just about gender. It meets at the intersections of gender, race, class, religion, culture, the law, all factors which need to be taken into consideration. The case is set to resume in spring of 2019, and the ruling could actually be overturned, and this could go to the Supreme Court. So we'll see how everything goes. Stay tuned.